Okay, in the news, everyone's been talking about Brock Turner. Or should I say, rapist Brock Turner. The young man who basically got away with rape. If, for everyone who doesn't know, this young man was from Stanford, and he raped a girl behind a dumpster while she was blacked out. Because the judge also went to Stanford and his daddy pleaded with the judge, he got 6 months in a county jail, and he'll probably get about 3 of those months served. He gets very lenient care, because wasn't seen as such a big deal. They were more concerned with his rights than the victim's rights. They tried to blame the victim. They tried to explain how this would irreparably affect Brock, and made him out to be the victim for, quote, 20 minutes of action. That's his father's quote. So while everyone is outraged that this poor girl is not getting the justice she solely deserves, let me remind you that there's a lot of Brock Turners in the world, which is sad for everyone involved, especially the disabled community. And this population has the highest incidence of sexual assault of any minority. And there's not too many statistics, but the statistics that are on file as of the 90s and early 2000s are just so atrocious, I can't even keep them in my head. I had to write them down for you to understand the magnitude of this. Okay, compared to women with a disability versus women without a disability, 37.3% versus 20.6%. That's how high domestic violence occurs among people with disabilities. They're often victimized, and it's a repeat cycle. 80% of women and 30% of men with intellectual disabilities has been sexually assaulted. 50% of that female population has been sexually assaulted more than 10 times in their lifetime. 10 times. And that's just a low number. It could be dozens. That alone irks me to the core. 83% of women with both a physical or an intellectual disabilities have been sexually assaulted in their lifetime. 83%. That's too much. I can't even wrap my head around these numbers. What's sad is the reason why there's statistics are not accurate in some instances is because only 3% of sexual assault cases for people with intellectual disabilities are ever reported. Only 3%. I can't imagine the magnitude that go without a voice. 50% of boys who are deaf, 54% of boys who are deaf, and are likely to be sexually assaulted, as opposed to 10% of boys who can hear. 50% of girls who are deaf is the rate for being sexually assaulted versus 25% of their hearing counterparts. Do you understand these numbers? It's enough to make you sick. And the thing is that 97 to 99% of the assault cases are with people that the individual knows. 32% is a family or acquaintance. 44% is dealing with predators that have to do with the victim's disability. A caretaker, an institution setting, hospital setting, transportation workers, home health aides, out of home health aides. This is the most vulnerable population because there's just so much opportunity here, and I'll get to that. Opportunity is the biggest factor in these cases. As most of you know, rape is not about sex. It's about opportunity and power. This population has a lot of opportunities for access, and because many of them are voiceless or other factors, they're easy targets. Many of them don't have the educational skills because sex education and rights are not taught to individuals with disabilities because they're not seen as desirable. They're not seen as someone who would ever be in a sexual situation, so let's not educate them. And that's where tragedy strikes. It's a cycle that continues over and over. Many of them, like I said, are caretakers, and they use every manipulation under the sun. They use the fact that some of their victims cannot speak. Some of them don't know what's going on or have no way to get their message out. Some of it's just facilities don't know how to report things like this. Their credibility when they're able to report something is not believed because they have the mindset of a child, or they can't communicate, or maybe they misinterpreted something. And so a lot of cases just get thrown out. And this leaves it to be okay. And I will tell you, this is not okay by any means. This should shock and horrify you. And justice needs to be done. There needs to be more background checks. There needs to be harsher penalties. There needs to be cameras. There needs to be accountability for these actions. There is no excuse. This can't continue. And so, while I understand the issues related to the case with Brock Turner, and just to put it in perspective for those of you who are not affected by the disabled community, this girl, and I'm not going to say anything was her fault because it's never a rape victim's fault. She was in a vulnerable situation that night. She was intoxicated and she became vulnerable. She became helpless for one night, one horrible night. And now imagine, just for a second, perpetually being that vulnerable with no out, with no power, and it has to stop. People just can't imagine this sort of thing, and so they ignore it. And this is the only population that has such large percentage going unnoticed, untreated, uncared for. And it's unbelievable, and I wish that it weren't true, but it is. Now, there's many different reasons, like I said, that I had explained about why this happens, but it all comes down to power. And this is a powerless population for a long time. There's also a lot of psychological things that are said to manipulate this individual. And it's not always someone with an intellectual disability. It can be someone with a physical disability who gets trapped in this abusive situation out of fear. If you leave me, I'll put you in an institution. If you leave me, I'll get the children and you'll never see them again, because what judge will give you children? If you leave me, you won't have any place to go. I control your finances. And that's totally legal, depending on certain situations where you have a benefactor who pays for certain things for their disabled spouse or their disabled individual. Rights are skewed. Stories are changed or interpreted differently. Even physical things like you can't get up out of your seat, you can't get out of that bed, I will move your medical equipment away, I will take you out of your support system, I will isolate you from anyone outside that could possibly help you. And these are fears, and these are actual physical barriers that keep both men and women in these abusive relationships. This needs to be examined. This needs to be a discussion about rape culture. We talk about men and women and gay and lesbian and transgendered individuals. And yes, everyone deserves a voice. But why not the disabled community that makes up the majority of rape victims in society right now? Who's affected so much by rape culture, yet this is the one dialogue that people are not having. I would love to hear your stories, your thoughts on the subject right below in the comments.